I speak for a living. I'm a teacher. But I think of the important speeches I've ever given, there are probably two. This one and the eulogy I gave at my mom's funeral. So I am nervous. Hold on. So when Kim introduced the idea of icuTalks to me, I was like, yeah, that sounds neat. And then I came to one, and I was like, this is amazing. Sign me up. And then she took me up on that in a text message and said, hey, I need a speaker. Will you do it? And I said, sure. What's the topic? In true Kim form, she said, the topic is always Jesus, and then said nothing else. And I was like, awesome, Kim. This is going to be great. And then she said the topic was change, and that change is good. And I thought, I could probably talk about that. And then the closer the time got, I thought, what am I going to talk about? And then I thought, okay, I'm going to talk about things that I haven't talked about in a really long time. And so before I go through kind of my story, I feel like there are some things you need to know about me now. Because as I tell you my story, I want you to focus on who I am now. Because I think for the person who needs to hear this story, you need to know that there is light at the end, and this can be what it looks like. So I am a mother. I have a wonderful 2-year-old daughter. She is amazing and a mess. I have an amazing husband right there who loves me, even knowing my story, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I am new in my walk with God, but I feel like I'm new in acknowledging my walk. He has always been there. So those, I think, are 3 really important things that you need to know about me before we start. So I wrote down some notes. I'm probably just going to forego the notes just so you know I'm kind of a casual talker. I consider this to be a conversation that we're having. So there's that. I'm an English teacher, so I'm going to quote C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis said, God whispers to us in our pleasure, but shouts to us in our pain. Please let me tell you the shouts that I heard. Okay, when I was 20, almost 21, 3 significant changes happened in my life. My parents moved back to Michigan, my sister got married, and a very, very on-again, off-again relationship ended very badly. And that sent me, those 3 events sent me kind of in a downward spiral, and with really no one there to watch what I was doing, there wasn't anybody to stop me. So I started on this really kind of self-destructive path of lying and drinking and spending a lot of money, and then lying to cover up the spending of the money and lying to cover up the drinking and all of these things that I was doing in excess that were really negative. But if we were going to go out, I was the one you wanted to go out with because I was going to pay for it. So everybody kind of ignored all of the other things that I was doing because they were having a good time on my dime. So this probably happened over the course of, I think probably 6 months. There's a lot of it that I don't remember. I think part of that is God shielding me, and I appreciate that. And part of it's just my body's way of saying, you don't need to remember this anymore. But through this course of lying and being deceitful and leading this kind of double life that my family didn't know about, I started dating a man, and his name was Brad. And we happened to go on vacation to see his family. And I was at kind of the very end of this really, really negative cycle in my life. So much so that as I would drive down the road, I would pick a tree and think I could hit that tree and this could be done. I wouldn't have to deal with it anymore because I didn't know how I was going to get out of this cycle that I had created for myself. And I didn't see anybody who was willing to say, Meredith, you're doing really terrible things. We want to help you find your way out of this. And so I just thought, I'll just end it, and nobody will really know the truth, and then I won't have to deal with it, and it'll be done. Fortunately, that didn't happen. God had a different plan for me. But so I went on this vacation with my then boyfriend, Brad, and while we were on vacation in D.C., I got really sick. So we came back to Tennessee where I lived, and I was still really sick. So they took me to the hospital, and I checked into the hospital, and for some reason I had a kidney infection. They couldn't figure out how it came about, but I had a kidney infection, but it was pretty bad, so I was in the hospital. And my dad, coincidentally, happened to be in North Carolina on business. So he stopped on his way back to Michigan, where my parents lived, to be with me while I was in the hospital. And my sister came from Knoxville to be with me. And she happened to go to get lunch. My sister's name is Megan. Megan happened to go get lunch at a restaurant that I used to work at called All Souped Up in this little town in Tennessee. And while she was there, she saw the owner, who was a really good friend of my family, and he told her all of my lies. He said, "Do you know this about your sister?" and just laid my stuff out for him. And she did not. And so she came back to the hospital, and she told my dad, and thank God I was in the hospital, because I was going to need a little bit more help than what they initially thought. And it was like DEFCON 5 in my family. My mom flew in, and we had a powwow. I do think I should take a sidebar and tell you that Steve, the owner of that restaurant, is still an amazing family friend, and I actually called him when I got in the parking lot of Mosaic to tell him what I was doing tonight, because I knew that without him, I would not be here on this stage. I would have found my own way out of this situation, and it would have been really negative. And so I just needed him to know that he was my saving grace, and I appreciate him for that. So I made that phone call, and he's thrilled. So back to my self-destructive ways. So my parents came, and they said, "Pack your stuff, you're going to move back to Michigan." And I said, "Absolutely not. I have created this mess. I need to solve my problem. I need to face the situation that I've put myself in. I really need to take ownership." Because before this, I was really good at blaming other people for everything else and saying, "Well, this happened because of so-and-so," or "I couldn't get to this because I just didn't," whatever. I had lots of excuses for lots of things. So I felt like this is God saying, "Meredith, deal with the situation you're in. Face the music, face your friends, face your family, solve your problems." And so I did. And it sucked. It was terrible. I heard people say things to me that I don't think I would ever say to someone else. My very best friend in the world told me that I didn't deserve her friendship. I still think, and I understand that she was mad, and I appreciate her being mad because it meant that she felt something for me, even though I had wounded her so. I still think that's probably the hardest thing anyone has ever said to me, the hardest thing to deal with. But it was a lesson learned, and we have an amazing friendship still, so that's great. But I really felt like I had hit rock bottom, and the only way to go was up, and I know that's kind of cliche to say something like that, but that's how I felt. And I found this in Psalms. I'm not well-versed in the Bible. We couldn't speak verses back to each other. I'm working on it. But I found this in Psalms 40. "He brought me up out of a horrible pit, out of miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock, and established my goings, and hath put a new song in my mouth, even praise unto our God." And I feel like that is exactly how I felt. I woke up one day and said, "This is it. I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to fix my mess." And I feel like God lifted me up out of that clay and just set me down and said, "Do it again. Do something new. Make something better." Being here with my parents was difficult. I went to therapy. I did everything I was supposed to do. I agreed to have an open communication with my therapist and my parents and said, "You can know everything you want to know about me." They knew things about me they didn't want to know, because in addition to the lying and the drinking, I'd also had several relationships and been unfaithful in those relationships. And you just had to own a lot of stuff, and my parents knew a lot of things about me that I hope to never have to know about my child. Never. But, I think through all of it, it was a learning experience for my family and for my friends. If anything, I learned how to be accepting and forgiving. I think that's probably the most impactful change, is to be accepting and forgiving, to be graceful and to be gracious. Todd, who was here, said something several weeks ago, probably around Christmas, and I told him about this not that long ago, but the message was basically to be gracious, and he said, "Give grace because we're all a little broken." I will always be the first one to give grace. I think when you feel like there is no grace to be given, find me, and I will give it to you, or find someone like me. There is always forgiveness. Rick Warren says faith develops in the valleys. I found your valley, and I also found my way out of that valley. And as I look back, I think I've always thought people who said that God speaks to them, I won't say that they're crazy, but I've always felt like, I don't know what you're talking about. God and I have never talked. He's never been like, "Meredith, I'm ready. Let's have a conversation." Until I agreed to sign up for icuTalks and talk. And then I felt like God was screaming at me, and everywhere I looked was this message of change and giving grace and being a receiver and a giver of all of these things. And so I was reading in Samuel Hannah's prayer, and there was something that really just stuck with me, and it was, I'm going to take some liberties with this, but in Hannah's prayer to the Lord, she says, "There is no rock like our God. The bows of warriors are broken, but those who stumble are armed with strength. If anything, I am armed with the strength of the Lord and his forgiveness for me and all of the things that I did." And I can say honestly, 12 years later, I am a new person. I'm a better person. And I came out on the other side, hopeful and blessed. So I guess if anything, if you take one thing from my 10 minutes, there is grace to be given to you. I guess that's it. Okay.